Thank you for listening to Barrier Breakers, Building Communities and Connecting the Dots. Special thanks to Melissa Azam, Judge Tim Bryan, Ubaldo Moraz, and Prithvi Mudana. Hosted by Jeremy Flowers and Nell Spencer.
Welcome back to Barrier Breakers, Building Communities and Connecting the Dots. I am Nell Spencer, the Director of Outreach and Education at the Women's Center of East Texas.
And I'm Jeremy Flowers, Director of Coordinated Community Response at the East Texas Crisis Center.
And today we'll be talking about coordinated community response.
Yeah.
Jeremy, tell us about what you do, and then tell us about what coordinated community response looks like and what it is.
Yeah, so my job is essentially very new to our organization. We've never had this position at the East Texas Crisis Center, so I'm really excited about establishing an intentional coordinated community response in our service area. So I'll be basically overseeing the collaboration of building community partnerships and trying to get the community to understand and recognize domestic violence and sexual assault as a community-wide issue that we all have stake in ending and supporting survivors so that we can work to prioritize survivor safety, hold offenders accountable, and end violence in our community. And so part of that looks like overseeing the domestic violence high-risk team. And so we have a domestic violence high-risk team. It's one of 7 in the state. And so what it does is it brings together system partners to identify high-risk cases, to prioritize them, to ensure that we are doing everything as a system to keep her safe and hold him accountable. And so we have law enforcement involved, we have the district attorney's office, we have probation, we have the healthcare system, we have the Title IX office from University of Texas at Tyler involved. And so this team comes together to discuss ways that we can identify high-risk cases and prevent them. High-risk, intimate partner violence homicide is predictable, therefore it's preventable, and so that's what this team does. And so identifying high risk looks like understanding what lethality factors are, right? And so one of the most common factors in identifying high risk is a prior history of abuse, right? So if domestic violence is ongoing, then that increases the risk of homicide. Another one would be the presence of a firearm. We know the presence of a firearm in an abusive environment increases the likelihood of homicide fivefold, 5 times, 500%, however you want to say that. The other one is strangulation. After a survivor has been strangled one time, that increases the likelihood of homicide by 750%.
Yep. And before you move on, can we kind of identify the difference between strangulation and choking?
Yes, that's good because the terminology matters, right? And so choking is something internal, right? If I swallow something and it goes down the wrong pipe, as they say, that's what choking is. Yep. And someone has to give you the Heimlich and clear the airway. Strangulation is external. It's impeding the breath. And that's actually a charge.
It is a charge.
So that's the difference from my perspective. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Totally right.
Okay.
And so when I try to explain it to people, I'm like, think of like a straw that you drink out of. Let's say you like to put lemon in your water and you accidentally like suck up a seed. That would be considered choking because it's an internal force that keeping you from breathing. And strangulation is that outside force that's cutting off your airway. And that could be hands, it could be pillows, it could be anything else that's an outside force keeping you from being able to breathe. So
Absolutely. And so you bring up a really good point there, because it doesn't necessarily have to do with the neck. If I'm putting all of my weight on your chest and impeding your ability to breathe, that's another form.
And I'm pretty sure strangulation now in the state of Texas is an automatic felony. So.
Yeah. And so that's a very important distinction to make, is because our terminology and how we frame things and how we talk about it, it really matters.
It does. Sorry, continue.
No, I appreciate that. That's great. So another indicator of high risk situation is pregnancy. So intimate partner violence, homicide is the leading cause of death for pregnant women. And so that dramatically increases, the likelihood of homicide. Recent separation, we know leave-in is the most dangerous time. So that's an indicator. Stalking, stalking is another indicator. And so essentially advocates, meet with survivors, do a risk assessment, and if they identify, that this person's in a dangerous situation, then they get referred to the high-risk team. The high-risk team evaluates everything that's going on with the case, from the law enforcement side to the DA side, from the hospital, and see what we can do to maximize her safety, and also what we're doing to hold the offender accountable, whether that's monitoring them, trying to set bond conditions that keep her safe, or whatever we can do to prioritize her safety, but at the same time keep him accountable.
Yeah.
And so in addition to that, coordinated community response really hinges on establishing relationships with system partners and the community as a whole, right? Because
talk to us about what a system, you say system partner. What does that mean? What is a systems partner?
Okay, so we're part of the system, right? So when a survivor experiences domestic violence, usually they may have to contact law enforcement, right? And so then law enforcement is the system. Healthcare is the system. Probation is the system. Battery intervention is the system, right? We're service providers. We're part of that system. Anywhere that a survivor seeks services or assistance is a part of that system. So
anybody that touches that survivor, anybody that has contact with that survivor in lieu of her case.
Yeah, it could be CPS, district attorney's office, whoever that is. And so, and it's interesting when you think about all the pieces of the system a survivor touches once they are a survivor, right? Or once they seek help, or once they call the police, And then there's so many different areas, so many people that they have to talk to. So that's, kind of going down a different path, but that's one of the reasons we try to not make them repeat their story.
Right.
Because they have to already relive it so often.
Yeah.
With the police, with the DA, with the hospital, with the advocate. Like, it's just constant bringing it back up and telling it. And that can be just re-traumatizing, stressful, just exhausting, right? Mentally and emotionally.
And what we know about trauma is the further you are removed from that situation, the more you remember about it. And so I think it's important for people to understand that if an assault has just happened, the survivor may not remember all of the pieces, but coming back to it a week later, or maybe when they're in counseling and they're working through their things and they're meeting with their advocate on a regular basis, they're like, oh yeah, I remember X, Y, and Z happened. And so part of that, the community response or the DVHR team is coming back and saying like, hey, something else has come to light. This might be helpful, right?
Yes, yeah. And so it's really important that as DVHRT teams meet, that they're survivor centered, right? So they're prioritizing every decision around the survivor. And you know, some DVHRT teams have survivors on them. And so that's really a crucial aspect of a DVHRT team, a CCR, is being survivor-led, survivor-focused, so that we are honoring survivors' experiences. We're prioritizing their voice and listening to their expertise.
Right. I love that. I think it's so important to get that feedback in the real world. Like, this doesn't work. So let's come up with something else that might be more beneficial or that might work better. And and I always say, like, if you've not experienced it, you don't actually know all of the ins and outs of it. And so having the survivors on the team is probably so beneficial to the success of the team.
Absolutely. And so, in addition to the success of the team, it's really about creating relationships with community partners, system partners, both, right? And so that we're not all working in silos, so that we're not working against each other, so that we can identify gaps in services that we're each providing, so that we can understand what each other's role is, have a clear understanding of how each other operates, so that we can better serve the survivor, so that we can work better to prevent violence in our community, so that we can work better to ensure that the offender is being held accountable at every level.
Yeah. And I love that. I think it's so important. And again, part of what we're doing and why we're doing it is so that we are partners in our roles here, And I think being partners with the people in your community is so important in fostering positive relationships, because we lean heavily on law enforcement. We lean heavily on the DA's office and on counselors to help and assist our clients, and on our staff members who work with our clients. And so, like, we are a community that needs to come together and rally around these survivors, and we can't do that if we're working in silos.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's so important that the team is cohesive.
Yeah. And so when you take a more bird's eye view of coordinated community response, it really does, as cliche as it sounds, it takes a village, right? I mean, because we're all members of the community. We're all neighbors to someone. We all go to church with someone. We all go to Little League games, with someone. We're all a part of the community that essentially has the ability to raise awareness, the ability to provide resources, and educate, right? And so, like, even so much to say in that bird's eye view, this podcast is part of coordinated community response, because we are seeking to raise awareness. We're seeking to educate. We're seeking to let people know that we might not already be working with, that we're here. We want to work with you. We want to learn from you. We want to help you learn, whatever that looks like in your capacity or your role as a community member or a system partner.
Right. And talk to me about the difference between prevention work and coordinated community response work.
So they can kind of play into each other as, getting people engaged in the work. However, prevention is really focused, because primary prevention in particular is focused on addressing attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that foster supportive violence, right? So when we're working with men to try to change traditional norms of masculinity that foster their support of violence against women, then that has to be really focused on their foundational beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors about what it means to be a man. And so that isn't a one-time, hey, let's talk about this and then leave and everybody goes, because our core beliefs develop very young, and then they're reinforced through society growing up. Like, we get reinforcement of our gender roles, our masculine norms, what it means to be a man by the men in our life, through media, through our coaches, just through all the men that we come across with are somehow, intentionally or not, modeling to us how to be men. And so it really takes work to do that. So the CDC says that it takes 6 to 9 sessions for a change in beliefs, attitudes, or behaviors to start the process. So even in that time period, it doesn't guarantee that there's going to be change. And so my personal belief is that, like, life is about growth. So it's not going to happen in a 6-session group, right? I'm going to continue to grow, and I hope that as a man I continue to grow on into the end of my life, because like I don't want to stop growing. And I think getting on my soapbox here, I think the socialization of masculinity really hinders men's ability to grow and develop our internal selves, right? And just denies us the capacity to flourish fully as human beings, because we're supposed to always be in control. We're not supposed to be vulnerable. All of these constricting ideas about what it means to be a man just put us in this box.
And it takes you more than 6 to 9 sessions. But what those 6 to 9 sessions, and as a counselor, I totally believe, like, if somebody's coming to me for counseling, they're not going to spend 6 weeks with me and be a completely different person. What I'm hoping is that, and through these like kind of similar situations, is they can take one step off the path that they've always been on and say, like, oh, okay, maybe I can do this differently. And instead of going this way forever, they've taken that one step here, and in 8 months, 2 years, 3 years, they're now over here. That one step has changed how they've decided to do the rest of their life. And so, through prevention work, we're asking not just men, but the people we come in contact with, men, women, and children, to say, well, let's think about this maybe differently than how we've always been taught.
Right.
And that can be overwhelming. It can be intimidating. It can like rub us the wrong way. Like, no, like, why would I do that? It takes a certain amount of confidence to say, I'm going to do it differently. And so you have to foster that. Like, how can you be confident in being different? And that takes time.
Absolutely. And so the TASA conference, their theme this year is Seeds of Change. And so it could be you said something one time to somebody and that plants a seed, and that's the catalyst. But they have to be ready to receive what you're saying, right? And so they may not receive it right then, but that doesn't mean they don't hold on to it and it comes into play at a later time.
Absolutely. So how much does prevention work play a role in community response, or are they completely separate?
I think they mesh really well in that, we often want to look at violence as an individual problem. This person perpetrates violence because XYZ, instead of understanding that violence is a cultural problem, right? And so when we work to change the culture, we have to involve the community. When we work to prevent violence, it takes the community to do that. So I think in that regard, I think they work together really well, in that, whether it's, your church group, your social gathering club, whatever that looks like, just having these conversations can be that preventative work, right? Because all it really takes is normalizing it, because, you know, these aren't conversations that people are having.
Right.
They're not in their social club or in their church group or wherever they are. This typically isn't a conversation that people are having.
Yeah. And we're not asking people to like go out and, you know, be an advocate for change, right? We're asking people to just be willing to have a conversation. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to maybe make you feel upset, or like we're asking you to do something completely different. But like, let's just talk about gender roles. Let's just have an open conversation about it.
Yeah.
Let's just have a conversation about violence and what that all includes. Let's talk about culture and what society says is right and wrong when it comes to X, Y, and Z. That is the start of that change.
Yeah. And it can be difficult. It can be challenging to, you know, maybe you feel like you're going against the status quo. But, you know, try it with your friend group, right? If it's uncomfortable for you, try it with the people closest to you first, you know, and see how that works out. You know, because usually our innermost circle will be the most forgiving, you know? And so if you get it wrong or you messed up, that's okay. And if you want to maybe have some guidance, reach out to us.
Yeah.
And we can try to help with what that will look like.
I remember the very first time I met you, we were at an event and we were talking about your men's group that you do. And you invited somebody at the table to join, like, just come see what we do. And their response was, oh, I don't hit women. I don't need to come to that. And I'm pretty sure like you and I looked at each other, and because that's like the response that we get is like, oh, I don't participate in that. I don't need to show up.
Right.
And it's like, well, that response is the problem.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Show up. You can always learn something new.
Yeah. And that, you know, that's a great example of culture, right? Because that's the cultural response is, I don't hit women, so I'm not part of the problem, or I don't have any stake in this. But, you know, we do play a role, especially as men, in fostering norms of masculinity, whether that's the good, positive norms of masculinity or the negative.
Yeah. So like, even if you think you're the most healthy individual, show up to those meetings, like learn something new and take something with you so that you can share it with your friends, because it starts with us and those people that come to those meetings, and then they can take it out and they can spread that. And that's the change that we're looking for in our community.
Absolutely.
Community ownership of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And it happens on every level, right? The individual, the relational. And so that's coordinated community response in a nutshell, is just getting the whole community involved, whatever capacity you're in changing the culture to make it more safe for survivors, and letting the community know that we're not going to tolerate violence here.
Yeah. So if you could say, I need X, Y, and Z, or I need this to happen in our community to help the movement, if you could have anything granted, the miracle question, what would be your like big, I want this to happen?
Oh, that's a huge question. And so just because of where the majority of the focus of my work has been throughout, I just want more men to be involved. You know, and that could be the man who has a bunch of friends over on Sunday to watch a game, to talk to his friends. That could be you know, maybe you're a manager somewhere and the majority of your staff is men, or all of your staff is men.
Yeah.
You have the ability to influence change, right? And so that's maybe you lead a men's group at church, just wherever those male-dominated spaces are. I wish more men were having this conversation about, well, what can I do to end the problem? What can we as men do to be responsible and be accountable to our community, because we want to be better men. We want to help the community out. So that's my personal magic wand, would be to get more men involved.
Yeah. Love it. So talk to us about, as we're saying, men be involved. You have a men's group starting.
Yeah. So it'll actually start May 29th, but this will be going on throughout the year. And then it's a 6-session group. It's a discussion group, a partner with the Texas Association Against Sexual Assault. They've provided a curriculum. So we have 6 discussion topics, and 5 of those will be really in-depth discussions about what does it mean to be a man, what does male accountability look like, how to be active bystanders, how to be allies to women and girls. And then the essential core of this discussion group is that we take these discussions and we continue having them outside of the group. So it goes back to just normalizing, just having the conversation.
So tell me, what is the difference between that group and BIP?
So BIP is after the fact. So Batterer Intervention and Prevention Program is where an abuser has been court mandated to take this program to find accountability for the choices that they've made. And so hopefully, in the opposite side, the prevention side of that is to get into a safe space with men where there's no judgment. And we just talk about what it looks like to be men, have candid conversations about our struggles and, things that we see, and learn how we can support each other, but also how we can evolve and change so hopefully that we create a culture that no longer sees women as inferior, no longer objectifies women, no longer overwhelmingly perpetrates violence against women and other men.
Yep. Yeah.
So
how, if I wanted to get involved, let's say I'm a man in my community, how do I get involved in that group? Where do I go? How do I sign up? Who do I talk to about attending?
Yeah, just reach out. You can reach out on our email, Facebook, Instagram, or just send me an email, Jeremy, Jeremy @etcc.org. If you're unsure, but you want to still have the conversation, please reach out. Let's just talk. You don't have to join the group, but I would love for you to. But yeah.
What day of the week and what time?
It's Thursdays at 6 p.m.
At 6 p.m.?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So.
Well, do you have anything else about coordinated community response before we?
Yeah, I think, it's a community issue. We all have a stake in supporting survivors, being responsible for others in our community, loving thy neighbor, and whatever that looks like for you. I think coordinated community response is essential to ensuring that we are saving lives and we are reducing violence.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that in our community, and thank you for taking that on. It's a huge thing to do by yourself, and you've been shaking things up and moving mountains in Texas, and this DVHRT team is really essential for survivor success and for the elimination of violence in the future for these women. So thank you for that, and thank you for making sure it happens. So
thank you for being a part of it.
If you or a loved one have experienced domestic violence or sexual assault, you can contact the Women's Center at 800-441-5555.
Or the East Texas Crisis Center at 903-595-5591.
And if you are a man in East Texas, hit Jeremy up and attend one of his classes.
Yeah, absolutely. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Barrier Breakers, Building Communities and Connecting the Dots.